Om Shanti. Good morning. The most frequently asked question is if I'm supposed to continue with thoughts and meditation, well, what sort of thoughts? And so these meditation commentaries give you an insight into how to continue with thoughts, but in a very specific direction. In a very specific direction, so that you are the master of your mind and you're using your mind to connect with the divine. So I'm sure everybody had a great sense of peace and being surrounded by love. This confluence age, the confluence between the dark and the light, is the most auspicious, the most benevolent, the most powerful, the most important period within the whole cycle. For half the cycle, things move sweetly and very well. And then, as we lose our power, we come to the point where consciousness changes and we come to a state of material consciousness. And we search, we look, but we don't find. And so the descent continues. This image is the one of the cycle, but there's another image we use of the ladder, and that it puts across this idea that there's a gradual loss of power and purity to the point where at the end of the Iron Age, the darkness is total. And we live in an era of post-truth. We started with truth, and then there came a point when we understood truth, but we didn't have the capacity to follow through truth. And so recognizing that we were doing things that were not quite right, but we didn't have the power. And so the slide downwards continued. But it comes to a point where you can't even differentiate between falsehood and truth. And so at such a time when there is such total confusion, there has to be extra help given to humanity. Think about a closed system and how a closed system begins with potential energy that is full. And as the system continues, entropy comes in, and there's a gradual loss of that energy from potential to gone. And then you come to a point where there isn't any more energy left at all. And so if you see the state of human beings today, I don't have energy, I have so much fatigue, there's ME, there's burnout, all the signs of stress and intense challenges for the human mind and body are all evident. We didn't have the viruses attacking us in the way that they do today. Viruses have always been there, not a new creation, but our immune system was so strong that we could manage. And then the toxicity of the air, the water, the food, the earth, all of us have been part of creating that, making that happen. And we have all the illnesses, and of course all that impacts the immunity, and so we have the conditions that we have today. And so a parent who is compassionate and loving would say, I've got to save my children, I've got to help them. And so the incarnation of the divine, to be able to not do things on an external level. If you just create a garden, but you don't educate the people who are going to use the garden, it'll become a jungle very quickly. But the people who are going to use the garden have to be educated And then they themselves will turn the jungle that they've created into a beautiful garden. And so this is that time of recreation. And so powerful, beautiful, turbulent, exciting. It's absolutely everything. And so how am I using this time? And karma and drama work together in perfect harmony. My karma creates the drama. Something's happening. But why me? Why not you or you or you? But it's happening to me because it must be something to do with me, because the universe doesn't differentiate or doesn't discriminate. And God definitely doesn't. And so my karma creates the situations I find myself in, good or not so good. When it's the fortunate situations, we are happy. And nobody asks the question, why me? We enjoy it. But when things are not so good, then the question comes, why me? But in fact, by the end of the Iron Age, everybody is dealing with some type of trauma in one way or another, some type of sorrow. And so my sorrow might not be visible, but definitely there's things that I carry within myself. Sometimes it's very external and visible, but sometimes not. But everybody starts their spiritual journey at the end of the Iron Age at the same point. And so the journey then to becoming pure. I'll introduce 3 words which don't come in Western thought, but they're totally dominant in Eastern thought. And it connected with the difference between linear time and cyclical time. And so these 3 words are Satto, the purest state, Sat, pure truth, Rajo, the middling state, and then Tamo, the lowest state, and that's the negative state. And so we start from Satto, we move to Rajo, we come into Tamo, and then from the Tamo state, we have to get back to the Satto state, and we can't do this on our own. It's the help that comes from the divine that makes that transition possible. When 2 systems come together in terms of climate, there's a lot of upheaval, there's storms. I remember it was a very massive thing that happened at the end of the 80s, probably 88 or so, in the UK. And the weather forecasters had given no indication there was anything wrong. And by the afternoon of Thursday, everything became very dark, very suddenly. And the storm started. And it grew and grew in intensity through the whole of Friday. And by the end of Friday, it has subsided. And by Saturday morning, I was out to go to a program. And some of you know Regent's Park. And I was in the conference hall there. And you couldn't drive past the trees that had fallen. And afterwards, we heard that millions of trees across the UK had come down, including in Oxford, where we have our retreat place. We didn't have it then, but we heard about it later. And the dramatic scene that had happened in this way was because the weather people told us afterwards 2 systems came together. And so it created this trauma, huge, huge storm. And so the darkness, the impurity, and then you're bringing in the light, the purity. And so I'm moving from Tamo to Satto on an inner level. And yes, there are challenges and a few adventures, but you go through it knowing that you're going to get to the destination that you hold in your vision. And then in terms of the world outside, you also see a lot of turbulence, and people don't realize why there's all this uncertainty and turbulence, but it's because of this transformation that's happening. But that too will subside, that too will come out, and we'll find a world that's cleaner, that's purer, that's more in balance, that is working in a different way and is working in harmony. And so that's the state where we have to get to. So this time is very, very precious. And it's interesting that the signal that Dadi was giving us right at the start of the retreat, when you saw that little clip, it was about how she's never wasted time, money, or energy. And that's a fact. Every moment of hers was used in a worthwhile way, whether it was for silence and studying and moving forward, or whether it was serving and helping and just being available. One of the things about leadership that people today speak about is being available. And this is something that happened in a very natural way, right from Brahma Baba and the mother and the daddies. They would just make themselves available. Daddy would take a long route from her room down to the place where we have reception in Global House in London. And she could go straight from her room down 4 floors to the car park and get into the car and go wherever. But she wouldn't do that. She would come from her room, go through all the stairs and negotiate all the corridors and the rooms, and then come to reception, just so that she could greet and meet all the people who would be happened to be along the way. So just one simple idea of the quality of generosity of spirit, in which time is for me to use in whatever way I choose. And I was asked by a group in Abu recently, Dadi always played with time, just as she played with God. And so they said, did she ever miss any flights or trains? And I said, well, things would change and the flight would be delayed for her. Other people wouldn't know that the flight was delayed for her, but we would see that she never missed a flight, but the flight was delayed. So things like that would constantly be happening. We forget how powerful our thoughts and vibrations are and the impact they have on our body, on everybody around us, but also on matter and something which is beyond matter, time. And so if I use time in a worthwhile way to be able to serve and give happiness to others, whatever else I'm doing, I can do it with a smile. I can smile at the car park attendant. I can smile at the person who's giving me the ticket, not the parking ticket. Maybe a smile would help anyway. But when I'm getting a train ticket, whatever it is I do, if my awareness is of that order, then there's going to be something that I give to everyone I come into connection with. And I'm not counting how many kind gestures have I made today. It's natural, it's happening automatically. Little things happen and people remember them for years. And they say, you stopped to say hello. I didn't think you would, but you stopped. But things like this. And so they say that in the darkness, even if there's one little candle, it shares light. And so that light is carried, and you are that light. And each and every one can make a difference. First, in our own little world. But if you multiply that with this group, then you can imagine the light is growing and growing. And I know some of you have big plans to touch billions and bring light into the world. And yes, it'll happen for sure. I don't know what the threshold is, but Rupert Sheldrake, many, many years ago, talked about the 100th monkey. And I think that that's still true. Reach a critical mass, and then it's no longer a minority idea, but that critical mass has shifted things so that then it becomes an idea that's accepted by the majority. And so each one of us, and collectively together, we can make a huge difference. So let me use every moment for myself to move forward, but also to support all those I connect with. Some people say they don't have time. But in fact, the mother used to say, Mama, Baba doesn't want anything that's useful for you. Just use what would have gone to waste and make it the best. Turn the waste into the best. And so, yes, I have family. I need to fulfill my responsibilities. I have a job. I need to do it with integrity and honesty and not cut corners and do everything that demands. But all the waste time, all of that I can use in the best way possible. But also the leisure time that I have. And most of us have leisure time. When I'm walking, when I'm exercising, yes, I need to do that. But what am I doing with my mind? Am I using that also as a time for reflection, just to go deeper within myself and see what's going on, and to be able to respond in a different way at all times? And so using time in the best way possible is something every one of us can do. And cut out the waste, and you have a huge amount of time. I think it was earlier on we were saying how at the end of the day, if I'm feeling exhausted and tired, it's not because of the amount of work I've done. It's the amount of waste thoughts I've had and the burden I'm carrying within. And so Baba's teaching us to cut out the negativity, cut out the waste, and even don't get stuck with the mundane, the ordinary. It needs a certain amount of attention, but if you're clear inside, then the amount of energy that takes is minimal. And then what you're left with is a mind that's now capable of pure, positive, elevated thoughts. And it's good for me, and it's good for everyone around me. So all good wishes for your journey. And I hope the turbulence isn't too much, but you have the capacity to keep drawing that power and using that power so that the turbulence also feels like a game because you're up above. There was a time when Gayatri was with me at that point. We've worked a lot for many, many years, and Judy and Rita and Jenna also. But this was very early on in the 80s. And it was a small group of us that had been working hard for a program called Global Cooperation for a Better World. And that gave spiritual birth to Rita. So that project had very good omens, many good things happened. But matching ideas from New York and London, Nairobi in Africa, Sydney and Delhi. Can you imagine the different perspectives we had? Really. And none of these projects that we did internationally could have worked if there wasn't that trust and love. And that helped us go through everything. And we had a meeting with one of the trance messengers in Abu, the main one. And we'd been called to Abu during the monsoon times when Abu was a little bit quieter. So it was just that small group of us there, about 15, I think. And the message came back to us that just remember, service is a game. And when you're playing football, sometimes the ball hits your shin, sometimes the ball hits somewhere else, so it's very painful. But you don't say, I'm not going to play anymore. You carry on playing. And so it's okay. If sometimes you hurt yourself a little bit, no problem. Get up again, brush the dust off, and keep smiling and carrying on. And just see it as a game. It's a game in which you're seeing your sanskaras, my predispositions, and what are my reactions. And I can deal with that. Once I know what I'm dealing with, it becomes easy. I'm able to take that help and move on further. And just yesterday we heard 2 rhyming words in Hindi. And it's Mela, the meeting, the gathering. And so it's the meeting, the one, but also this meeting, and Khela, the game. And so if you just remember that I have to stay connected, and this is the game. And all of it is going to be good fun if I treat it in that way. And so no blame, no complaint, because these are the ways thoughts, why, if, but, how, why, not. It's okay, it's okay. It's all for good purpose. I'm just sharing the story when we met with Dadi Gulzar, and the message came from Baba that the ball sometimes hits your shin, sometimes it hits your leg, and it's painful. But you don't say, I don't want to play the game. And it made such a huge difference to all of us. And it stayed with me all these years, just a game. So enjoy the game of life, the drama, but stay connected. Om Shanti.
समय को पहचान,
recognize the value of time,
स्वयं को पहचान,
recognize yourself.
तो समय और स्वयं valuable है,
because the time and the self both are very valuable.
एक दो से ये लेन देन करने में और कोई बात नहीं है.
When you have exchanges with each other in this way, there is nothing else left to
मेरे को
exchange.
अजन ये ख्याल है, भले 40 साल से विश्व भर में सेवा हुई है, परंतु प्रैक्टिकल अजन में तो ऐसे निकले कोई.
It's service has she's been part of service for outside of India for the last 40 years, but still we have to ensure that some emerge who are able to carry a spiritual message that has an impact on many others.
जिम्मेवारी है, वो भी पूरी करना जरूरी है, फेंकना नहीं है, कोई सन्यासी नहीं बनना है.
Of course, we have a responsibility. Whatever responsibilities we have to fulfill those responsibilities. We're not becoming renunciates that leave the life of that we already have and go and live in the jungles.
त्यागवृत्ति तो तपस्या अच्छी है.
When there's the attitude of renunciation, attitude of creating that distance inside, then you're able to have concentrated and deep meditation.
जैसी अंदर स्मृति होंगी, याददाश्त, मुझे अपन को आत्मा समझ के परमात्मा के रिलेशन से, कनेक्शन से कितना लाइट बन गए,
we have to have
लाइट मिल रही है.
that awareness And that memory, that the deeper my connection with the divine, the more the powerful power of the connection with the divine, then I'm able to experience that truth and depth inside myself.
Connection ठीक है, तो आवाज इनके द्वारा सुन.
As you can see, because the connection of this microphone is right, we're able to use it and you're able to hear me.
बोलते मुंह से है, सुनते इनसे हो.
I speak with my mouth, but you're listening because of these microphones.
तो मैं देखती हूँ, जब से मैंने साइलेंस में रहना सीखी, तब तो साइलेंस थी नहीं. बाबा के
When I first started to stay in silence, there were no facilities of science.
जब पहले समझदार में आया इतना सब प्यार से, पर एक बार दिल्ली में बाबा के आगे माइक दिया.
In the days of Brahma Baba, we didn't have the microphones. Once somebody placed a microphone when Baba came into a gathering, Baba said, no, I don't need this. But I'm seeing now that actually science does hit its work.
Silence में रहते भी सब काम accurate हो.
And we have to stay in silence and ensure that through that silence, everything we do is precise and accurate.
Normally, Sister Mohini would have been with us now, but she's really, she's not up to it this morning. So I've asked if Sister Gayatri would share with you a little bit about what was the fundamental notion for Dadi about the call of the time, which was friendship.
Well, I'm also glad that Dadi Janki was brought into the room because she was the one who actually called a few people together in New York City on Fifth Avenue, where our center is. And she asked them the question, how could we be, or how could she be of service to them? And they were representatives from the UN, but also Peter was there, Peter Senge from MIT, who co-facilitated these dialogues with Sister Jayanti for a very long time and a very good friend of Rita's. And he was on the phone at that time, and she was talking to him, and you saw one of the pictures with Robin Gibb, you know, from the Bee Gees, and he was a very good friend of Dadi's. And he visited the meditation center on that same day. And Robin never uses a lift. Meredith, I may remember that. And so we had to get the security to open the stairs to get him up, because you could get out, but to come up, they needed to do it. And so all of that was going on when Dadi was talking and finding out how we could be of service. And I remember a few of them said, Dadi, we don't want you to create events that would bring together the VIPs of the world. We rub shoulders with them on a daily basis. What we would like is to understand the phenomenon of when the BK uses the term silence, what do they mean? And how does transformation occurs within this domain of silence? And I think that was what they wanted to explore. So the call of the time for them was that. And it's funny that the Sustainable Development Goals agenda is set within the context of transformation and universality. And I always put in leaving no one behind. And so for Dadi Janki, she always created, well, the way she created the call of the time, and she actually came up with that title, the call of the time. And because one of her dearest friends, I think, is time. This is when Dadi Janki's friendship was with human beings, of course, but Dadi Janki's deepest friendship was with God. And I think second to God was with the drama, which is also called time. And then on the basis of those two, she reached out to everyone else in friendship. Now, her vision of each one who was invited into the Call of the Time dialogues, which then became Call of the Time retreats for further flourishing or sustenance, and then experiments in silence, which are the booklets that you see. So it started progressively getting deeper and deeper into what we call, the territory of subtlety, of what happens within this domain of silence. And it's not just a silence, it's a yogic silence, the silence between the soul and God, the silence between the soul, God, and the drama of life, which is other souls. And so each one that was brought into, she always taught us to have a vision of them. And the vision, she said, that each one represented 100,000 others. That when you leave this room, you're going to be encountering 100,000 others, whether consciously or unconsciously. And the way that they should be served and the way they should be treated is with that vision. And so she made everyone a friend in that way, assuring them that she will be there, a call away. Anytime they wanted to be in touch with her, she was available. She would be reaching out to them vibrationally with her pure feelings, her good wishes, her elevated thoughts. And then she would also be sending them a message, which she wanted to be a daily message, but that ended up being a weekly message. And then the message got transferred now to Sister Jayanti and Sister Mohini. And I think they've been sending it out. But why did she send those messages out? Because she knew that her friends were wanting to hear from her. And so they weren't just words. It wasn't just a message, but it was something that touched their hearts and moved their souls. So the Call of the Time, the foundation, is friendship. She also encouraged. Why did she show up for Wally and Dow's when he was heading up the State of the World Forum? Why did she have us invest so much in it? Because she knew that that support was needed, the spiritual strength Wally wanted to have. And not only did he do that, but when it came that he headed up the conference on habitat, which was in 1996 in Istanbul, Turkey, he invited Dadi to come and stand and say whatever she wanted to say in front of all of these diplomats. It was one, he had her in one of the plenary sessions, and Sister Jayanti would remember that. So he did that in the name of friendship. He did it because he knew she brought that spiritual power to him as a friend, and he maybe wanted to extend that to all these people he was serving. But of course, the topic was habitat, and we went in with what is a city, but it's people. And so I think that this is the spirit of the Call of the Time. She also always ensured them, and she would always have these conversations with Peter, with Tex. Tex was the Asian director of Unilever. And she would have these conversations with them to remind them that they were actually engaged with projects that involved so many people's lives. And they were involved in the secular world in such a way that they would need support. So they should support one another. They should reach out. And if there was a project that they wanted to consult with one of them on, they should be available to help. And it wasn't just at the level of making the project successful, but it was at the level of friendship, that you could come to, to any one of them and discuss things that you were grappling with, whether there were obstacles in your way, whether there were challenges you were facing. And so Lee used the word trust. So it was a faith that existed in the process, but there was a trust in knowing that there was someone there to listen to me, to understand me, because I had that intimate spiritual connection with them through a call of the time, and to help me through it in a non-judgmental way and even in a non-conditional way. And I remember we used to have this thing, which is less so now in our dialogues, but used to have a lot of emphasis on how to prepare oneself to be in dialogue. And one was listening. And I remembered being, like Judy said, it was silence. And I went into the dining room and found a group of them talking. So I jumped on my high horse and got I don't think I said anything, but my body language said it all. And then Peter called me and he said, well, why did you do that? Why did you, in other words, behave in such an objectionable way? Because you didn't like the fact that they were talking. And I said, but it was a contract that we would all be in silence. And then he says, but they were not ready for silence. And if somebody's not ready to do something, honor it. And I felt that I was learning so much from them on the subtleties of the territory we were treading. And then he says, look at Daddy. Look at how she listens. She just doesn't listen to us, but she listens to herself listening to us. And it's only when you listen to yourself listening to someone will you actually hear them. And that's, of course, true friendship. And so all of these subtle aspects of friendship were very much out there. And so when I think of subtle friendships, I definitely think of Daddy. She also wrote, there's a book, Dear Friends, that Daddy wrote. And I'm thinking that maybe that's a book we should definitely give, but we don't have it here. And finally, what I would say about two things I would end with is one that when Daddy Jayanti turned 90 years old, Judy and I wrote a book. And it was called Something Beyond Greatness. And we always saw her, of course, as someone beyond greatness. And there were three principles of Daddy Jayanti's life that really epitomize what friendship meant to her and still means to her through people like Sister Jayanti and Sister Mohini. And that was, she always saw us with a vision of love. She saw the world with a vision of love. And so she never saw us as pieces of people. She saw us as whole people, as her whole person. So she always saw us for who we are, and she always honored that. And so you could look at her eyes, you know, when you look at the images of her, what stands out, her eyes. The second thing is that she always acts from her heart. That was the second thing we pulled out of someone beyond greatness. She always acts from her heart, and she calls it bhavana. So when you're in front of her, she would say, okay, let's go into some silence. And together you'll be in the silence. And then she would talk to you. She would listen to you. She would have the conversation with you. But then at the end of it, she would say, you felt my bhavana, didn't you? And it meant you understood what I just said to you at the level of feelings, didn't you? In other words, your heart heard me. It wasn't just the intellect, but the heart and the intellect. And the other was she was always in the right place at the right time. She was always accessible, always available, always there. And I think that those three things epitomize friendship, the friendship that she offered us. And then Daddy Jayanti, you know, she had this way of saying, I never miss an Amrit Vela. And she was always true. Even if her body wasn't well enough, she was up in her bed because she honored that time of the dawn, because it told her something of the bigger time that we're talking about. And the other thing that she always reminds us of is that she was one of them who actually made traffic control, which we call traffic control, happened. Because it was something that she was doing. Daddy always says, don't ask me if I remember God, because I never forget God. I'm always in remembrance. And so for the traffic control, it was positioned as stopping the traffic of your mind. And we always say that traffic control means to stop the traffic of your mind. But recently, after Daddy left, and she left in the perfect year, she left in 2020. So I always said she gained perfection and left. And someone said to me, why are you calling traffic control trafficking of the mind? Why don't you call it a call of God? So I really felt this is what traffic control is. So I was sharing it with someone who comes to the Queen's Center to help. I live in New York City, and I live at the first center in New York, which is in Queens. And so the person who came to help, the traffic control song came on. And I continued talking, and she said, Gayatri, Baba is calling. Answer the phone. Baba is calling. So the traffic control for me is the call of the time now. It's in that moment, there's a call that I must answer. And it's the call, time is telling me, it's the call of God. So I give that 1 minute, and my 59 minutes will be taken care of. It's as simple as that. And so I would say that if, honor these times in your life, and God would always, it would be very easy to remember God. And that is the call of God, which is every minute on the hour. Secondly, Amrit Vela, it reminds us of the transition we're in. Nature, it's a call of nature at that time, and saying this is when the change is happening. This is when the light is changing. And of course, the friendship will continue through Sister Jayanti, because Sister Jayanti, you will now be our official spiritual resource of the call of the time. And because I say that, because when I was looking at Daddy Jayanti and I look at you with your hair absolutely like her now, I say that thank you very much for coming and for being with us and for being the friend who is always there, like Daddy Jayanti, always accessible, and someone we could always call on. You're just a call away. Om Shanti.